You know, there's a simple principle I've lived by for decades, and it's this: where your focus goes, your energy flows. That's not just a motivational slogan, it's a psychological truth. What you focus on consistently shapes how you feel, how you behave, and ultimately the quality of your life. But here's the kicker. Most people are unconsciously focused on everything but themselves. They're focused on comparison. They're focused on other people's opinions. They're focused on noise, on distraction, on drama. And they wonder why they feel drained, why they feel stuck, why their life feels out of alignment. When you start focusing on yourself, not in a narcissistic way, but in an elevated way, you begin to rewire the entire direction of your life. Think about it. Your mind is like a lens. If you constantly aim it outward, you absorb chaos. You internalize narratives that don't belong to you. But if you turn the lens inward and you start asking better questions, who am I becoming? What do I value? What am I feeding my mind, my body, my soul? Then everything begins to change. There's a concept in neuroscience called selective attention. It means that the brain filters out most of what's happening around you so it can zero in on what you've told it is important. That's why if you buy a red car, suddenly you see red cars everywhere. You're not seeing more red cars, they've always been there. You're just now tuned into them. Life works the same way. If you're tuned into fear, you're going to find more of it. If you're tuned into what you lack, you'll keep seeing everything that's missing. But if you're focused on building, on evolving, on creating, your brain starts scanning the world for opportunities that match that energy. Now, this takes discipline, it takes intention, because the default setting of the mind is survival. It wants comfort, it wants familiarity. And that's why so many people live the same year 75 times and call it a life. They're stuck in loops, focused on the past, focused on the noise. But you're here because something inside you wants more. And to get more, you've got to focus better. Not harder, better. Not everywhere, but inward. This is why silence is so powerful, because in the silence, you remove external influence. You begin to hear your own thoughts. Not the voice of your parents, not the opinions of society, not the expectations of the world, but your voice. And when that voice gets clear, your direction becomes obvious. You don't need permission. You don't need applause. You just need alignment. And here's the truth. When you focus on yourself, you're not withdrawing. You're preparing. You're recalibrating. You're getting ready to show up in the world in a more powerful way. People will notice the shift. They'll feel it, because focused energy is felt. It's not always loud, but it's undeniable. So ask yourself, what would happen if, starting today, you became ruthlessly intentional with your focus? What would your life begin to look like if you gave your energy only to what actually feeds your future? Most people are terrified of silence. Not just external silence, the kind where no one's texting, calling, or expecting a response, but internal silence. The quiet that happens when there's no distraction, no stimulation, no noise, and yet silence is where clarity is born. It's in that space where nothing is demanding your attention, that everything important finally has room to surface. We live in a world that worships noise, constant updates, constant opinions, endless stimulation, and because of that, we rarely get the opportunity to just be. But here's the problem. If you never sit with yourself, if you never create space to listen inward, then you're always operating from reaction instead of reflection. You're not making decisions, you're being moved by momentum that isn't even yours. Silence is powerful because it confronts you with the truth. It strips away the masks. It reveals what you've been avoiding. And while that can be uncomfortable, it's also the birthplace of transformation. Think of it like a reset. When you pause the world, even just for a few minutes, you create the space for something deeper to emerge. And that something is you. Not your conditioned self, not your curated identity, but your core, your authentic self. Philosophers have spoken about this for centuries. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor, wrote about the importance of withdrawing into oneself to gain clarity and strength, not escaping life, but stepping back to see it more clearly. It's the same reason monks retreat into silence, not because they hate the world, but because they want to understand it without distortion. We don't need to disappear into the mountains to access that kind of peace. We just need to stop running from ourselves. And that's really what silence requires, courage. It's easy to fill your life with activity, with noise, with people. What's harder is to get quiet long enough to ask, what am I actually feeling? What do I actually need? Am I living in alignment with my highest values, or am I just checking boxes to avoid disappointing people? These questions don't have quick answers, but silence invites them to rise. Psychologically, there's something else happening here. The brain's default mode network, the part active when you're not focused on external tasks, lights up in silence. This is when we engage in introspection, when we process our experiences and form a deeper sense of self. So silence doesn't slow you down. It helps you integrate. It helps you connect the dots between who you are and who you're becoming. And here's what's beautiful. The more you embrace silence, the less you need to explain yourself. You no longer crave external validation because you've made peace with your internal compass. You speak less, but when you do, it carries weight. You stop chasing noise because you've found depth. So here's the question. Are you brave enough to get quiet, to sit in the silence, not to escape the world, but to finally meet yourself in it? There's something deeply liberating that happens when you stop chasing, when you stop trying to prove, to impress, to earn your worth in someone else's eyes. And it's not about arrogance, it's about alignment. Because when you're constantly trying to chase approval, attention, or love, what you're really saying is, I don't believe I'm enough unless something or someone out there confirms it. But the truth is, the most magnetic people you'll ever meet are the ones who've stopped chasing entirely. They've turned inward, done the work, and built something within themselves that others can't help but feel. You see, real power is quiet. It doesn't beg. It doesn't perform. It doesn't need to be validated every 5 minutes. And when you stop chasing, you begin to embody that power, not because you're trying to be seen, but because you're finally seeing yourself. We're conditioned to believe that if we want something, success, love, respect, we have to hustle for it. And yes, effort matters. But there's a difference between aligned effort and desperate chasing. When you're in alignment, your actions come from fullness, not fear. You're building from a place of wholeness, not trying to fill a void. And that energy, people feel it. You don't have to say much. You don't have to explain yourself. You just are. And that being carries more influence than any sales pitch ever could. There's a principle in psychology called attachment theory, and it explains how we form relationships and why we react the way we do when our sense of connection feels threatened. When we chase, we're usually operating from an anxious place. We fear losing something or not being chosen or being overlooked. And in that fear, we lose our center. We stop being ourselves and we start becoming performers in someone else's narrative. But when you stop chasing, when you decide that your peace, your growth, your evolution matter more than being liked, something amazing happens. You become clear, you become selective, and ironically, that's when the right people, the right opportunities, the right energy start gravitating toward you, not because you forced it, but because you became a match for it. Philosophically, this aligns with the Taoists have taught for thousands of years, Wu Wei, the art of non-striving. Not inaction, but effortless action. Doing without forcing. Moving with the current of life instead of exhausting yourself fighting it. When you stop chasing, you start trusting. You trust your timing. You trust your worth. You trust that what's meant for you won't miss you if you stay true to who you are. And make no mistake, this takes strength. It takes maturity to pull your energy back and redirect it into your own development. But that's where your power lives. Not in being everywhere, doing everything, pleasing everyone, but in becoming so grounded in yourself that you stop needing the chase at all. So, ask yourself this. What might start coming toward you the moment you stop running after it? Healing isn't loud. It's not glamorous. It doesn't happen in front of an audience or through applause. Real healing, the kind that changes your life from the inside out, happens in the quiet, uncomfortable moments when no one's watching. When you're alone with your thoughts. When you're sitting with the pain, not running from it. That's the part no one posts about. But that's where the transformation begins. Most people want change, but they don't want the process that change requires. They want the outcome, not the inner excavation. And that's the trap. Because transformation doesn't come from performing for the world. It comes from doing the work that no one claps for. The journaling, the self-reflection, the confronting of old wounds, outdated beliefs, unhealthy patterns. It's work that's often invisible, but it's the foundation of everything visible. The paradox is this: the deeper your healing, the less noise you make. You stop needing to announce every step of your journey. You stop needing to justify your growth. Why? Because healing reconnects you with your own authority. When you stop outsourcing your sense of self, you stop needing external permission to evolve. You start realizing, I don't owe anyone an explanation for who I'm becoming. From a psychological standpoint, this is called integration. It's when the parts of you that were fragmented, hurt, rejected, ignored, are finally acknowledged and brought into wholeness. You don't suppress them, you don't numb them, and you don't pretend they never existed. You face them, you sit with them, you give them a voice, and then you choose a new path. That's the healing. Not fixing what's broken, but remembering you were never broken to begin with. You were just operating from a place of pain that hadn't yet been understood. And listen, that kind of work requires solitude. Not isolation, but solitude. Time to reflect, time to rebuild, time to realign your life with who you actually are, not who you had to be to survive. And sure, that may mean stepping back from certain people. It may mean letting go of roles you played or masks you wore. That's part of the death and rebirth cycle of personal evolution. But every time you release something that no longer serves you, you make space for something that truly does. There's a reason why some of the strongest, most grounded people you meet are the quiet ones. It's not because they haven't suffered, it's because they've processed their suffering. They've transmuted their pain into wisdom. And that wisdom creates a calm, quiet presence that doesn't need to dominate a room, but somehow shifts the energy in it. You don't need to broadcast your healing journey. You don't need to prove that you've changed. Just live it. Let your energy speak louder than your words ever could. Because when you've done the work in private, the results will speak for themselves in public. So the question is this: are you willing to face yourself, even when no one else is clapping? There comes a point in your life when you realize that protecting your peace isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It's not about cutting people off impulsively or building walls out of fear. It's about choosing what deserves access to your mind, your energy, your time. And that choice is a power move. The world we live in is designed to fragment your attention. Every app, every headline, every voice is competing for your focus. And if you're not conscious, if you're not intentional, you'll find yourself constantly reacting instead of responding, constantly drained instead of directed. Protecting your peace starts with understanding that your inner state is your most valuable asset. If your mind is cluttered, your decisions are compromised. If your energy is scattered, your impact is diluted. Silence, as we've already talked about, isn't about absence, it's about presence. When you stay silent, when you stop engaging in every argument, when you no longer feel the need to respond to every opinion or defend your journey, you reclaim your energy. And that reclamation, that's where clarity, confidence, and emotional control live. Philosophers like Epictetus taught that freedom is the ability to choose your response, but you can't choose wisely if your peace is constantly being hijacked. You have to get to a point where not everything gets a reaction. Not every comment needs a comeback. Not every trigger deserves your attention. The moment you recognize that some things are better left unengaged, you elevate. You're no longer playing defense, you're playing strategy. From a psychological perspective, this is about emotional regulation. It's about moving from reactivity to sovereignty. When your nervous system is constantly overstimulated, your ability to make grounded decisions goes out the window. But when you create environments, both internal and external, that are rooted in calm, you give yourself the space to think clearly, to act intentionally, to stay connected to your vision. And here's what you'll notice. When you protect your peace, you start seeing what's been costing you. The relationships that drain you, the conversations that go nowhere, the habits that keep you in cycles you swore you'd outgrow. You become ruthlessly honest about what's actually serving your growth versus what's just keeping you busy or emotionally entangled. And from that space of honesty, you can begin to rebuild with better boundaries, stronger self-respect, and a renewed commitment to your higher self. This doesn't mean you disconnect from the world. It means you interact with the world from a centered place. You become unshakable, not because chaos disappears, but because you're no longer available to it in the same way. You've chosen peace as your baseline, not passivity, but power expressed through stillness. So here's your moment of truth. What are you still giving energy to that no longer deserves a seat at your table? Everything around you is a mirror. Your relationships, your environment, your results, they're all reflecting the state of your inner world. The mistake most people make is trying to change the mirror without changing the person standing in front of it. They push harder, complain louder, manipulate circumstances, hoping that something out there will finally fall into place. But the truth is simple. The world responds differently when you do. You shift your energy and suddenly people treat you differently. You raise your standards and the old patterns can't survive. You stop chasing, you start healing. You learn to protect your peace. And what happens? Reality begins to reorganize itself around that new version of you, not instantly, not without resistance, but inevitably, because you've become different and life has no choice but to reflect that back. This is more than mindset, it's embodiment. It's not about thinking positively and hoping for the best. It's about becoming the kind of person who naturally attracts the kind of life they want to live. When you work on your habits, your beliefs, your emotional regulation, you are literally altering your neurological patterns. You're rewiring how you see yourself and what you believe is possible. And when that changes, everything else follows. There's a deep psychological principle at play here called self-concept theory. Your self-concept is the internal blueprint you hold about who you are, what you deserve, and what you're capable of. You will always act in accordance with that blueprint. You'll self-sabotage if something good exceeds it. You'll settle if something familiar aligns with it, even if it's toxic. So when you evolve your self-concept, when you raise your internal image, your behaviors shift, your boundaries shift, your entire frequency shifts, and as a result, your outcomes begin to align with your elevated identity. This is also why silence and focus are so essential, because they give you the space to hear your own voice clearly, to update that internal blueprint without the interference of other people's expectations. It's not about isolating forever. It's about refining who you are before reintroducing yourself to the world. Philosophically, this touches on the idea of congruence. When your inner world and outer world are aligned, you feel powerful, you feel calm. You're not in resistance, you're not forcing, you're flowing. Not because life is perfect, but because you are centered. You know who you are, you know what you value, and because of that, you move with clarity and purpose. This is what we mean when we say everything falls into place. Doesn't mean life gets easy. It means you stop being the thing in your own way. You stop living in contradiction. You become the version of yourself that life responds to differently because you've aligned your thoughts, your actions, your energy, and your standards with who you're here to be. So ask yourself with radical honesty, if life is just reflecting me back to myself, what is it trying to show me right now?